Okay. You guys ready? Okay. Call to order for a Watertown City Council meeting for November 7th of 2022. Please rise while Hank Rosso, the chaplain of the Watertown Fire Department, leads us in prayer. And also from Midwest Bible Camp.
Thank you. Please join me in prayer. Our great and heavenly God, our hearts are full with gratitude this evening. We've so much to be thankful for. Tomorrow we vote in this great land, and we know that even though in our own community that we're all different, that we are united with our love for this area, with this love for Watertown. God, we're thankful for those who keep us safe at night. We thank you for the law enforcement with the Watertown Police Department and the Sheriff's Department. God, we thank you for the fire department, the firefighters, and the EMTs and paramedics that watch over us as well. And we have so many great services in this town, we often take them for granted. And we're sorry about that, but we do want to say right now, thank you for everything. And thank you for a time we can celebrate Thanksgiving, and may it linger in our hearts throughout the year. And we thank you for all these things in this time together now. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay. Bueller. Danforth.
Here.
Pauline.
Here.
Paulson. Here. Shuddy.
Here.
Tupper.
Here.
Billhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum is established. The chair will entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda with one change. Item C, we have had a request to take it off of consent and put it on the regular agenda. We will put it at the end of tonight's agenda items. With that said, the motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. Motion made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any discussion on that, Council? Hearing none, the motion is to... Oh, Councilman Vilhauer? I was speeding along.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wondering why, as we look at the liquor license renewals, are these some that came in late, that they didn't get in with the rest of the batch, or?
Finance Officer Bob Zine?
That is correct. Yep,
Okay.
we had a few that didn't make the cutoff to get onto the last meeting, and we do have two more that potentially will be
Okay.
before the council
Okay.
later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any further conversation on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Excuse me. Now is the time for public comments. If anyone is here who would like to address the council on something that is not on tonight's agenda, now is your time to do so. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public comment section, move it to a motion to approve tonight's agenda. So moved. Motion made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Bueller, I believe it was. Sure. Was it? Are you okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item A is an application for a new retail malt beverage and wine license to go to Get Your Should Together. For more information, we'll go to our Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzine.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, before the council is an application for the new retail on-off malt beverage and South Dakota Farm wine. Fees have all been paid, and the notice of hearing was published in the paper. So if there's any further questions, I can try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will open up a public hearing. If there's anyone who would like to speak to this item, now is your time to do so. No one seems to want to talk about it, so we'll close the public hearing, open it up for council action. Do I have a motion to approve the application? Motion made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Shuddy. Any conversation on this, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the application. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item B, there is going to be a little bit of change in the wording of this one, so I will ask for a motion. We don't need to amend it because if I read it incorrectly, not incorrectly, then that will be the motion that we will accept. Item B will now read, an approval of amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement for consulting services associated with the Ice Arena project, project number 2116, with Tegra Group Incorporated, in the amount of $286,500, and authorize the city manager or the city manager's designee to execute change orders up to $75,000. That will be how it reads. So the verbiage at the end of it will be, and authorize the city manager or city manager's designee to execute change orders up to $75,000. So to explain that a little bit more, we will go to said city manager, Amanda Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll have our Public Works Director speak to the contract directly, but we do have a guest with us this evening. Dick Strasberg with Tegra Group is here to speak a little bit about the project as it sits today and what to expect going forward, both from process perspective as well as future items that the council may be asked to take action on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Manager Mack. So yes, tonight's action, it's really a lot the same as any other contract amendment that we use for our design professionals on our other city projects. This one's a little bit unique because of the scope and nature of the project here. We're dealing with nearly $36.5 million ice arena project. So with that scope of work, we've opted to hire what's called an owner's rep. That owner's representative is Tegra Group. And we've had Tegra Group on board since the early scoping, planning, and designing of this ice arena project. They've been instrumental in landing our architect, which is 292, our construction manager at risk, who is RJM, and a lot of behind-the-scenes work well beyond that. So what this action here tonight will do is amend their formal initial contract and add in what is known as construction services for some continued owner's rep services to be provided to the city. Again, with this being like any other capital project that we run internally through the engineering division, we always assign an internal city staff member as the project manager. In this case, it's Justin Peterson, the assistant city engineer, and myself are tandemly taking on that role. And we work hand in hand with Tegra Group and our design professionals to see everything through and check everything off all along the way. So it helps make sure that the project is in good hands and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. With that, this amendment would be to the tune of $286,500. I wanted to highlight that it also includes a subcontract with RSCS. They're an organization that help with the initial commissioning of the operations aspects of the building. They've already chimed in ahead of their contract with help in selection of a Zamboni machine, for example. They're very highly knowledgeable in ice arena operations. So Tegra has plugged them in as a sub-consultant to them and would be included in this contract with Tegra. With all that being said, I will pass it over to Dick, who's here this evening, and he is the president, founder of the Tegra Group, and it's been a pleasure to work with. We look forward to working with him through the completion of the construction phase here, pending the agreement of his contract tonight.
Good evening. I'm Dick Strasberg with Tegra. I think the first thing we got to comment on is the project's actually going. Concrete is being poured out there. Just drove by there on my way over here this evening, and it's a lot of activity out there, and it's going well. They've got a lot of heavy equipment on, and they're currently working to get the footings poured. So I think that's going very well. And also, I think we should comment just on the community's ability to raise money. So I've been in this business for 39 years. I've never seen anything like this. This community wants this project because the amount of money that's been raised since August is pretty staggering, and I think that's hats off to everybody involved on this. Clearly, you have community support on this by the amount of money that has been raised. So I think that's a congratulations to everybody involved on that. So I thought just make a few comments on just the overall structure on this, on how a typical project like this runs now in terms of what your involvement as a council is, will be going forward. So first we'd look at just maybe a few comments just on the structure of the project management, how it works when there's a city manager involved. because that's, many cities now are having city managers, and that changes a few things in terms of how these projects are sometimes managed. So first we've got, we'll use Amanda Mack as the city manager in her role. I'm going to say how we typically see it, and then it's up to you on how you execute it. But what we typically see is the city manager in that role, they are the executive oversight on the project. So that's who we go to if there's problems. We pull her in when there's problems, and we keep her abreast on what's going on, but not involved in the day-to-day. Then it goes to the engineering department to get involved on the day-to-day, especially on the internal operations on it. So in this case, it's Heath and Justin. So then they're involved on everything internal. So the way it typically works is Tegra is, we're hired as really an extension of the staff. That's our job. We're extension of your staff. It just happens to be we've got real large project experience, so we can help out on larger projects. And in this case, we've would say that it's the internal piece of it, of how it will work with your staff is, for example, when you have an invoice come in, we go through the invoice, and we have a stamp we put on every invoice that says recommended for approval. That means we've looked at it and we've checked it against the contracts, and to make sure that it's in alignment with that, and then we negotiate if there's any issues that are that are not, if it's incorrect. Then it would go to Justin. Justin would take it and approve it. Then it would in this case, go to Kirsten and get paid. We don't have anything to do with it once it goes to Justin. Then he takes care of it on that side of it. We do the project accounting, so we keep all the accounting for the actual management of the project, but that's different than your city accounting, which is more your typical process you have of paying bills. So I think it's important to just know kind of how it's typical on a project management front on it. And I think we've worked together long enough now where we've got it pretty well honed in terms of who is responsible for doing what on that, and how that breaks out. And the role, usually it kind of morphs as you go through a project, but the analogy that I've often given is it's similar to parenting children in terms of how you divide that responsibility. You get some general parameters on how you're going to do it, but you probably both get involved if there's a big issue. And I think that's how this works as well. We involve the staff on it if it's certain issues, and other ones we just handle it, other things they just handle it. So I think that's how it's set up on this one, and we feel real good about that, kind of where that's at today. So then if we look at the other point I'd want to make here is in terms of what your role is. So I think there's number one, it's Amanda's role is to keep you informed on how the project's going. So then she will choose to, maybe she brings Tegra in, or maybe her staff members in, to periodically give you updates. And those updates can happen as often as you want it. Oftentimes you hit kind of the benchmarks. Right now, there's a lot of nitty-gritty that happens on a project, and that's kind of where we're at right now with getting everything involved to get the thing out of the ground. But when it starts to get to other points, just generally keeping you abreast of what's going on. So that's number one. Number two is we recommended this the $75,000 so anything bigger than $75,000 as a contract, it goes to you for approval. And that's what we typically see on these projects. We have seen it between 50 and 100. I think Brookings has it as 75 as they've got a process that's that takes it from for I think every contract within the city, it's if it's over $75,000, it goes back to council. So that would be typical, and I think on a project like this, that's what we typically see, something like that. And then, so if you look at big picture, what's all under contract, most of it's under contract right now. Obviously, we got the large contract with RJM. We've got other smaller ones that will be coming. A few of those will be just even some administrative things. As an example on that is JLG, who competed with 292 to get this project. Well, now JLG has acquired 292. So that's going to be an amendment to the contract. It's a zero-cost change, but it's an amendment to the contract. That'd be something that that would not come back to you guys, that would go directly to the city manager. And if there's something bigger that comes up, we may have some of this, the fixtures, furniture, and equipment, that piece on it. For example, we had the Zamboni. We've ordered the Zamboni right now because it's almost a year lead time. So that'd be something larger that would go to you then. So that would be our recommendation on it. And then I think we'd also say that, that anything that affects the overall budget, you've approved a budget here that's roughly 36.5 million. If it goes a penny over that, everything goes back to you guys, everything. So everything goes to the council if it goes over the project total. And that is, if it goes over the total, I think it's fair to say that everybody on the staff is involved, everybody on the council is involved. So that would be very typical. That means anything that would push it over, everything goes to that. Now, we haven't had that happen now, so that we don't have experience in doing that. Let's hope we don't here either. But I think we would recommend that everything goes back to you at that point. Then also anything that would change the end date. The end date of mid-December. So anything would go back to you if it's going to extend out the project. So that's kind of the overview of where we are. Project's on, I think, it's moving ahead right now with the foundations are on track. And a lot of things are happening as far as getting ordered. There's long lead times on a lot of items. So that's what's being worked out right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strasburg. Please stand by for any questions. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the amendment. Motion made by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any questions on this, comments on this, council? Councilman Bueller.
Thank you. Dick, thanks for coming tonight.
Sure.
And we've had the luxury of working together for some time. We did the Wellness Center and just felt like you did a great job for us there. I just want to make sure everybody understands, especially the listeners, that the work that you've done coordinating our visits. We've had a number of folks on the council and people from the staff that have had the opportunity to visit some other ice arenas around the upper Midwest and to pick people's brains. So there's a lot of effort that goes into that, coordinating all those things, negotiating the contracts that you did. Got us in good pricing position, I think, with the architects and as well as the construction management firm, and interview those folks to try to get us the best people possible for doing that. So, I think those were some real key things that you helped us through, and
Thank you.
worth the money. Thank you.
Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. So my understanding is that there could be any number of amendments that could occur that are 75 or less than 75, and as long as it stays within the budget, so you could have 10 of them. I'd just throw out a number. And so it's any number, and it could be any contractor, correct? It wouldn't be, it's not just with you guys, it would be any contractor.
Correct.
Okay. Is FF&E included in our overall budget?
Yes.
It is, so that's in that 36 something.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so here's, Dick, first of all, I want to echo one thing that Bruce has said, is when we worked on Wellness Center, there was a lot of value in you and your group. It was what enabled us to get into our budget range that we needed to, so thank you for that, it was good. But my question I have now is when is your job done? Is it when we open the doors? And the reason why I ask that question is there's that first year of break-in, so to speak, of your facility. We saw this with the Wellness Center as well, that some issues came up, and we were just kind of left hanging out there, not from your end, but us, with contractors, engineers, whoever, to try to deal with those issues. So when does your job end as it relates to this project?
That's probably a real good question, because if we're involved in the construction, like we're proposing on this project, we can use the past to say that, we're involved, for a while after it's done. I mean, at least for the first year. We try not to have it go on, if we got problems that are 5 and 10 years from now. But yeah, definitely through that first year, we help you through that. Unlike the Wellness Center, we were on a on-call basis, which is different than the contract structure we have here.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, just a comment too, and echo what Councilman Bueller said. I've really enjoyed working with you going into this project. I never set foot in an ice arena before, and you've guided us along so well, helped build the team that we're working with, and as best you could, keep our costs in line. So I really want to thank you, Dick. It's been a pleasure working with you, and look forward to working with you in going down the road. But I do have one question tucked within your amendment. Explain a little bit for the listening public, what RSCS is doing is part of the subcontract you got tucked into your amendment. Explain what they do for us, what they have done for us already. Just open it up, and any comments you might have about their involvement.
Sure. So this group is a group of two guys that have ran ice arenas for the last 35 plus years. And something we've learned on these projects is there's a lot of lessons learned from people who have done it before. So these two guys are the ones that they can guide us through the whole process in terms of getting it all set up from an operational perspective. So that's their expertise. They've run these facilities before, and especially we've got new staff coming on for the city. They'll help train, help guide, be the sounding board for them. And I think if we look back in the last year in terms of what they've provided for in terms of the pro forma operating costs, things like that, they know this. They know it well. They're the ones that called and said, the Zamboni, you better get going on ordering that thing because it's got a long lead time on it. And that's, is that part of their contract? Not really, but it's a little bit like all of our contracts on these things. It's go back to my parenting analogy. You do what you need to do, whatever it is. As a parent, we provide shelter for our kids and we feed them. Well, then okay, let's start. That's the base contract. But then you do everything else that's involved, so that when you need to order something long lead, we get out ahead of it, and whatever. So they're, I'd say, an invaluable resource for us as we go forward, especially getting this thing operational, and knowing that we've got the recently hired Dusty. I think he's that's integral on this whole project, is having Dusty get fully up to speed, and then and eventually with Scott coming shortly after, is getting those guys, so when they're going to get this thing turned over to them, they need to know how to run this thing. They need to know how to operate it. They need to know everything about this facility as it's going up. And I think it worked well with the Wellness Center, with the gentleman we had involved at that time. So when they get this, they know the building very well before it opens. So that's what the whole purpose of bringing this other team on.
Thank you. Councilman Tupper.
Mr. Strasburg, I think this is a great idea to put $75,000 without having to come back to council. My question to you would be, how many times does this happen? And I'm just looking at the gross maximum price. Where do we draw the line to where we're, I trust your intelligence in this to tell us where this is getting into a problem, to go over that gross maximum price.
I think the risk exposure you have right now, I think, is more time than it is money, with long lead times. So I think that's probably where your biggest exposure is, because much of this is already purchased through the competitive bid process. We are running into long lead times that are, people can tell us a date, and that's nice, but if it doesn't always happen. So I think really the exposure on it is probably more in line with the timing. But to answer your question directly, in terms of what's over 75,000, the biggest risk you've got on any project is getting it out of the ground is always there can be big costs there, and so far we're doing well on that. And then getting through the other things of building startup at the other end of it, there's costs related to that. And these projects are, to use a little bit crude analogy, it's sort of death by 1,000 cuts. It's not just one big thing. So it's unlikely that there's a lot of things that'll come back that are over 75,000. There's little things here and there. And some of these are, like the FF&E budget, it's $2.1 million. Well, it's got all, probably the biggest thing on it is the Zamboni, which is a couple hundred, and past that, it's just a lot of small parts, a lot of detail, a lot of things, pushing through. So if there's are contracts that are bigger on that. For example, on technology, we don't know if it's going to be one contract or many. It's likely many. So we'd come back with things like that.
That's why I like this project, or the way we're doing it tonight, is because at 75, then you don't have to keep coming back to council, you know, and it is a very time-sensitive process, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Shoddy?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dick. So yeah, it would be fair to say then that you mentioned not only the money, getting to the 36 million, but the time frame. Probably in the times we live in now, it's the Zamboni, the roof system, and there's probably going to be many other items that are going to come up where we need someone that's got a pulse in that area to help keep the timing, stay ahead of it. That's probably the greater value. One of the better values in this process, having your group be a part of this. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's fair. It's one of the things we try and keep ahead of. Having said that, after doing this for a lot of years, we've never had a time like we have now where there's so much uncertainty with delivery times. But yeah, we try and keep ahead of it.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer?
Thank you, Mayor. I just like to make a comment so the public doesn't think that we're, abdicating our responsibility as a council. This isn't totally without precedent. If I'm not mistaken, I'm looking at our Public Works Director. We had a similar arrangement on the airport terminal project. I don't remember what the threshold was, but not every change order came back to us. We granted our Public Works Director the authority to approve a change order. So this is not without precedent. So just so the public doesn't think that we're, abdicating our responsibility as a council.
Maybe one comment on that. Something we often see in cities, especially when they grow to the size that Watertown is, we oftentimes see more of a formal procurement process that's on every contract. That's not just on a project related. We're recommending one on this project, but we oftentimes see that with where it's across the city, where you have, if you've got a city manager, that you see it across, across all times you're spending money of a certain dollar amount, like 75,000, 50, or 100, or whatever it might be. So we oftentimes see that. But being that you don't have, that's why we're recommending it here.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Just to piggyback off of what Dick said, we don't have a formal procurement policy citywide as he described. It is a goal that's come out of our strategic planning, so I would expect that here in the near future we'll be having discussions on what a policy should and could look like.
Good.
Any further questions or comments, Council? Hearing none, I actually do want to just go with the Mr. Strasburg Love Fest here for a moment and just thank you for all the work that you have put into this. I want to thank you in particular. I think that we often overlook this, but if it wasn't for your foresight to order the steel, the roofing, and some of these other things way ahead of time, we would probably be facing a pretty big delay right now. But as it is, because you had advised us to do that, we're sitting in a position where we can shell it out and keep working on it through the winter and stay on our hopeful project end date of next fall. So thank you for that. With that, the motion is to approve the amendment and authorize the change orders. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item C is an approval of the professional services agreement for construction testing services associated with the Ice Arena project with American Engineering Testing Incorporated, AET, in the amount of roughly $76,000. For more information, we'll go to our city manager, Amanda Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go to our Public Works Director, Heath Monai.
Thank you. Thank you both. So this is what we would call a materials testing contract with American Engineering Testing Incorporated. AET is a company we've used recently on some of the soil correction work that we've had to perform on the site before we were able to install the footings these last couple weeks. And we felt it was important to continue the material testing with the same company that helped establish the testing of the soil corrections. That way we have a consistency and liability and accountability for that type of testing all the way out through the completion of the construction of the project. So with this contract, AET would be responsible for a myriad of material testing, which would include soils and concrete testing. They would observe the reinforcing steel installations, the structural steel observations, and then also the bituminous paving observations and testing for the entire site of the new ice arena. Testing contract is just shy of $76,000 at $75,857, and I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the agreement. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Schutte. Open it up for questions and conversations. Council? Councilman Villauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, that this amount is included in the 36.3 million
That's correct.
price of the project. Thank you.
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. And this probably goes for Public Works Director Van Hoy. We paid the money. We did the soils testing. I guess it might be good to hear how that shook out. I guess that's not probably the right way to say it, but you know, it'd be nice to know where we're at with all that. And I know, Dick, you were probably involved with reviewing that, but it'd be nice to hear where that's at, because that's been a really critical part of this whole construction project, is making sure that we've got the soils right. So if you would comment on that, you or Dick, I'd appreciate it.
Public Works Director Von Eye, if you want to answer that or pass it off to Mr. Strasburg.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've been, staff have been working closely with J&J Land Sales, otherwise operating as J&J Earthworks. They're the landowners of the lot that we've purchased to build the ice arena on. Part of the agreement in that land transaction was that the soil corrections would be performed to the satisfaction of a third-party geotechnical engineer. That is where AET was brought on board, and they did soil borings out on that site before any soil corrections were made. They were able to identify some of the needed soil corrections, the depths that needed to be corrected to. And by soil corrections, what we mean is that they more or less dug out undesirable material and put in good material to build our building on. And so there were random spots and some consistent spots throughout the site. It's a large area that they had to correct. Some of the depths that they went to get down to undisturbed soil probably varied from anywhere from shallower depths of maybe 7 feet to as deep as nearly 20 feet, 16 to 20 feet. So there were some pretty deep excavations that occurred, and they brought in good engineered fill to backfill those areas. And that is really all the preliminary work that's gone into the site up till now. So where it's at now is at an elevation where they've been able to start installing the footings. And that's the work that's been going on the last week and a half, 2 weeks now, is the footing installations. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, Council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item D is an approval of the borrower's resolution for the water treatment plant equipment upgrades. I am just going to say to the council that items D and E are very similar, so we will be talking to both of these items over the conversation of just tackling D as far as like an official item for the agenda. But first, we will go to our city manager, Amanda Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. Our friends at Watertown Municipal Utilities are planning some upgrades to the water treatment plant, as well as a water main replacement on 3rd Avenue Northwest. This is coming to you all because they're issuing debt, and because they're part of the city in that way, you need to approve the issuance of that debt. And with that, I would turn it over to Adam Karst with WMU.
So we will now welcome Adam Karst to the City Council. He is the Director of Administration for the Watertown Municipal Utilities. Adam, I give you permission to speak loosely to the two items that you're here for tonight.
All right. Thank you, City Council. Appreciate it. And thank you, Amanda. As she had stated, we are in the process of, if you remember, we came back to the City Council this spring, I believe, and we went for 4 projects. And we were awarded those this summer, and it's about a $16 million for those total projects. That's the total projects. About 5 of that is grants, 5 million is grants, and about 11 million is loans. But what we're asking for today is your approval for the 2 projects that we're bringing forward. One is the water plant upgrades, which is a $1 million project. We're gonna get a $700,000 loan, and we're gonna get a $300,000 grant, approximately. So the $700,000 loan is what we're asking for in item D. And what that's gonna go for, it's gonna go for a lime slaker, it's gonna go for a chlorine injection system, as well as a SCADA system upgrade. So that's the $1 million project. SRF approved, our board went and adopted a surcharge to pay for that, so that debt is not, it doesn't go against the city's obligation debt. It's pledged by our water revenues, so we've adopted a surcharge to collect enough to pay for that loan. The first $1 million project is a 20-year loan at 1.875%, so we think we have a very attractive rate, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions about that project, or do you want me to cover the other project as well, Mayor?
It's up to you
Okay.
as far as how you think they are best handled.
Well, that's project number 1. The other one is a $3 million project. 2.3 million of that is gonna be a loan, and 700,000 of that, or excuse me, it's $3.3 million project. 2.3 million is a loan and 1 million is a grant. So that is the water main replacement project that we call Millette and 3rd Avenue. So that used to be a 12-inch water main that goes along 3rd Avenue all the way up to the Millette Tower. That's gonna be replaced with a 20-inch water main. So that's the project that we're working on for that aspect. So that rate as well has been adopted in a surcharge. That's a 30-year loan at the same interest rate of 1.875%. What we're seeing is a 8-cent per unit increase in our rates for the surcharge, as well as the other project is a 3.3 cents. So what that means for a typical residential user, and typical residential user, I'm saying you're using about 6,000 gallons a month. That equates to about 90 cents a month increase to your water rates.
Thank you very much. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the resolution. Motion made by Councilman Tupper and seconded by Councilman Danforth. I can allow some leniency to the council to ask questions or comments on both D and E, but the only motion actually being entertained right now is item D. So any questions or comments, council? Councilman Bueller? Councilman Danforth?
I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
You clarified it.
Oh, all right. Just something that might be helpful to the listening public, Adam, is when you talk about, there's some acronyms flying around, SCADA and SRF. You might want to just kind of explain
Okay,
what
so
those things are.
Sure, thank you. SRF is the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund. And the SCADA system is a supervisory control. What a SCADA system is looking at the operations of the water treatment facilities and making sure that it's operating and functioning properly, and it can give the treatment operators warnings and things like that if there's something going wrong. So, but I think that's the definition of a SCADA system, is supervisory control, something. Data acquisition, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay. The item under consideration is item D, an approval of the borrower's resolution. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item E, Chair will entertain a motion to approve this resolution as well. Motion made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. Open it up for questions and comments. Councilman Tupper.
This question for Adam. The 3rd Avenue Millette water main replacement, what is the route that's going to take?
So it's on 3rd Avenue. We've bored underneath the railroad, and now it's going to go north up Skyline Drive, and it's going to hit 6th Avenue, and then it's going to go to the east along 6th Avenue to the Millette Water Tower.
just to make that clear, because when you look at this, it's Third Avenue, we just redid Third Avenue. Oh, now the utility's gonna dig it back up again, so.
Good point, good point. So when we initially had this project under the works to get approved in the project,
Yep.
we wanted to do the whole Third Avenue, but we had to take that portion out of the project because we were already gonna complete that work in '23, and we could not incorporate that into the project. It's the same wording, but it's a good point, but it's
Yeah.
the same wording that's in the plan that's sent to the state. But the scope of work changed. It's gonna go from Third Avenue north up Skyline Drive up to Sixth, and then east along Sixth to the Millette tank.
I just wanted to clarify that for the public, so, thank you.
Good point.
Councilman Bueller.
Adam, while I got you here, I have a question.
Sure.
The main, what does that service? Does that service residential? Are you tapping into that for residential?
So that's gonna be our large water main. We have
Just to the
other
water
water
tower?
mains. Yes, it's a 20-inch pipe. It's gonna help with fire flows. It's gonna help with, flows across the system, and there's other mains that are branching off of that, but that's also,
Do you in fact tap into that for residences adjacent to that were on the old?
on the old one, yes. On this one, I believe so, but he's got some other different mains that are serving off of this, off
Now,
that big 20-inch.
When you do that, I believe that they have to be copper if they were replaced today. You know,
You're talking service lines?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm asking about.
Yep. No, this is a
To the tower
PVC. This is a plastic,
Gotcha,
portion
gotcha.
pipe.
Of course, okay, thank you.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Adam, can you just give a brief summary as why we're raising rates and not using our reserves for projects like this?
Well, for one, it's a needed project, and I think this is very cost-effective. I mean, when you can get money for 1.875%, it's very cost-effective, especially when in the bank, we're receiving, I think, 3.2%. So as for a cost basis, it's very advantageous for us to take it through a project, through a loan. Plus, we're gonna get 30% of it paid for with a grant. So it's gonna cost us 70% less, and we're gonna be able to get money at 1.875%, which we can receive over 3% on. So I think it's a good business decision to use that fund.
Finance Officer Bob Zine has something to say.
Thank you. I will add just one thing too. With the current requirement, anytime we enter into an SRF loan, we do have to put a certain surcharge on that to cover the debt. Then what can happen as the project gets done and the amortization, all the grants, all the funding comes into play, we can then reassess those surcharges that are required. So in the past, we had one of our SRF loans with the city that had a principal forgiveness. We can now lower that surcharge requirement, but the state does make you put a surcharge on it just to make sure that the debt is covered. So thank you.
Any further questions or comments, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the resolution. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item F is the 2023 budget appropriation. And we have two subheadings under there. Ordinance number 22-24 for the 2023 city budget appropriation, first reading, and approval of 2023 enterprise funds budget appropriation. We'll go to our finance officer, Kristen Bobzine, to tell us more.
Thank you, Mayor. We did come out of the budget hearings in October, and now it is time to approve the budget for 2023. So before the council right now is the first reading of what we consider kind of the governmental side of our budgets, which has a little bit different requirement than the enterprise funds. There were a couple changes. We had a $16,000 increase in the engineering. There was some wage adjustments that were necessary. And then under the Fund 212, we also did an increase of $50,000. There was a little bit of a communication with the miscellaneous concrete projects. So from the budget hearing to the first reading, those are the only two changes, and everything is still within budget as far as how I feel with the balance. So that was the changes between the budget hearing and first reading. And then on the enterprise funds in the airport, there was a need for some signage on Highway 20 that wasn't placed in the budget, so that's now in there. And then $35,000 for paint. There's quite a bit of expense when it comes to paint in the runway. So those two are the changes that the council needs to be aware of that are different from the budget hearing. So if there's any specific questions, this will come back to the council then for the second reading. So.
Okay, just to clarify something for the council and those viewing this, we have two separate items in item F, but only one of them is going to require action from the council tonight, and that is item 2, no? Oh, we'll do, okay, so even the second one, we will not have to handle today. Okay. So this is just conversational tonight, no action required. With that said, from the council, Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Finance Officer Bob Zine, you mentioned the changes from the budget hearing. Okay, we were going to add we call it a lake coordinator position.
I can speak to it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so those things have all been incorporated into
So
this.
so they are
Yes.
reflected in that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I think since the question was made, it wouldn't be a bad idea to explain that just a little bit more.
Yes, so sorry. When we did the budget hearing, we had a final slide that there were a few items that had either come in late or we were making some last minute decisions on. One of them was the engineering tech position, specifically to assist with lake coordination efforts with the Lake Pesca Water Project District. I want to make sure I get that right. Some additional changes after the budget hearing. We needed some flexibility within the wage ranges within engineering to fill those positions. We have one position that is open that we've had no applicants for. We'll have this new engineering tech position. And just generally within Public Works, in community development, we also have a position that has been open for quite some time with no applicants. So we wanted to have some flexibility in that wage range to help entice someone. Within the Fund 212, we did add an additional $50,000 for concrete improvements. That was just an error on our part. We got our wires crossed a little bit. And then within the Airport Enterprise Fund, we did add $35,000 for paint. Evidently in the past, that dollar amount had somehow been included into the CIP, which isn't really appropriate. It should be in operations. And then the Highway 20 signage, so to update the entryway signage into the new terminal. That had originally been part of the terminal project, and just due to costs, it was cut right away. So those are the only changes from what you heard a few weeks ago to today.
Any further, Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, if I can ask City Manager Mack, I do have a question. Amanda, when we have a position that, each position that we have is given a class, right? And then somewhere, I don't know how that all works, but it's defined into a given class. And then we have a wage range that we offer that out at. When we, in the case of the one you just mentioned, when we have to maybe change that in order to get somebody there, are we still working within the dollars within that range? Or
Yes.
does that adversely affect us if we were to hire somebody at a higher rate? Does that then kind of go out into and affect the others that because we've raised that rate? That makes sense?
Kind of.
Kind of?
So we have, our matrix is made up of grades. So you're a grade 125, 130, 135, all the way to 200, grade 200. And then we have 15 steps within each grade. So we typically will budget for positions at a step 6 or 7. What we're finding, especially with some of these more technical positions, is that we can't hire people at step 6, 7, or even 8. And they need to be brought in at a higher wage to complement what their experience and education level is. It's proving to be a challenge across all the grades, truthfully. We have lower grades that are off the mark as well. I think that a more appropriate long-term discussion is, I hate to say these words out loud because I don't want to get run out of town, but I do think we need to look at our salaries again. And a lot has changed in the market since the wage study was done in 2019 and implemented in 2020. But what was proposed in the budget tonight was specific to engineering and what we know from trying to hire people, trying to hire engineers. We have a very hard time and often cannot compete with the private sector for engineers. I don't know if I answered your question because I don't know if I understood your question.
Well, and I think you did. So to reiterate that a second, you're in your class or your range, grade, I think is the term used, and they stay within that.
Yeah.
It's just that they move up.
Yeah,
within
so
the-
you could potentially move someone, you could give them more steps based on years of experience. You could also move them to a different grade. So within engineering, for example, we have an engineer 1, an engineer 2, an engineer 3, we have an engineer tech, we have an assistant city engineer. So you could move someone within any of those.
But then they'd be
given
lower
their,
than it.
correct.
in there. Okay.
Yep, so if you move up a grade, you may have a lower step.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you for that.
Sorry if I confused everyone.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, on that same note, it makes sense, listening to and working with the surrounding communities. They're having the same issues, not able to hire engineers, because Manager Mack nailed it, saying that public just can't compete with private right now. And, you know, with our market now, that may come back a little bit in the near future, but yeah, as of right now, I know there's a lot of other communities looking for engineers as well that have had either 1 or 0 applicants over a 2-year period. So we just need to be a little cautious going forward too, that, you know, we get the right people, but sometimes you have to pay a little bit more to get those right people, so.
Thank you. Any further comments, council? All right, we'll wait to hear back more on this at the next meeting, I take it. Item G is an authorization for the police department to have Active Heating Incorporated repair various HVAC components within the police department for approximately $16,500, or $16,500 roughly. We'll go to, excuse me, our Chief of Police, Tim Toomey, to tell us more.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council and Manager Mack. We have had Active Heating go through our system recently after a couple of years of patchwork on our heating system especially. We've been kind of piecing it together. As you know, our building is beautiful, but it's 10 years old, so there was some minor maintenance things that have been postponed and put off. And we had one specific problem that was causing us a lot of headaches trying to get it to work right. So we had Active come in and do an assessment of the whole system and ask them what it would take to get this good for the near future and beyond. And they gave us this estimate. We did walk around the building. They did an excellent job explaining why these things needed to be replaced and the importance of it. It's a matter of either write a small check now or a big check later. So that's why we're coming before you ask for a supplement or a contingency in our budget.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion to authorize the purchase or the fee. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any comments or questions on this, Council? Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, me again here. My question really isn't too specifically to this, but is there a way that this item, to me this is a maintenance item. This just seems like something that our city manager can be, it's not a bid item, right? It just seems like it's a budget item, it's a maintenance item that we can't do that.
But there's not a budget.
No, well, but we do have supplement. Because it's a supplemental, we have to come here, so there's no latitude.
Speaking to the microphone, if there's budget left, within the police department budget, but we're getting pretty close to the end of the year. That's why we brought it. Also an item that should be discussed for the future procurement policy.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. This question is more not specifically for this project, but in a generality, how do we go about picking a local contractor for maintenance? Do we go with the same one that was part of the construction process? Just wondering how we go about working through that.
Yeah, it's especially our system is a very complicated system, so Active Heating has proven themselves to be an excellent company and somebody that we can depend on, and they're fairly priced. So we just trust the work that they do. They're our neighbor across the street, so we know where they live and work. So I'm sure they'll do a good job.
Finance Officer Bob Zine, did you have something to say?
The only thing I wanted to touch on with the budget, so essentially what we've kind of done is gotten council's pre-approval when something isn't in the budget. The council will see it again at the budget supplement time, but anything that's big and we don't have the budget for, it's kind of to give the council like the heads up, is everybody on the same page? So when you see it at the end of the year, the departments aren't then having to answer why they went over budget. It's kind of like ask first instead of forgiveness, I guess. So yeah, so that's kind of why we've held that stand.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the expenditure. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thanks, Mayor. I have Captain Rehorse. He oversees the building, and I just wanted to give him credit. So,
Thank you much. Item H is an approval of the 2023 open enrollment agreements for employees and authorization for the HR director to sign all necessary documents. We will have an A, B, C, D, and E under there, but I will leave it up to our HR director, Darcy Nichols, to tell us more about this and explain it.
This one. Are we good? We're on. Okay, this is a very exciting item. It's time to go to open enrollment for 2023. So we would like your permission to move forward with Wellmark as our health insurance provider for 2023 with two plans, our same two plans, the $1,500 deductible and the $3,000 deductible, with Delta Dental, again, as our dental provider, and VSP as our vision provider. So I'll entertain any questions that you may have. We did have an overall increase in premiums this year of 11.15%, just so you're aware of that as well.
Filling in for the mayor for the time being. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve these changes for 2023. Second? Councilman Bueller and Councilman Shetty. Now, open up for conversation, questions. Mike?
Is the percentage increase across all of them?
That's across the health insurance premium.
So aggregate of all those 4 or 5, I believe it is.
No, just health insurance.
Just health insurance.
Yeah,
What about the others then?
11.15%. Delta Dental, it's going to be an increase of $1.50 roughly per month for single and $3.50 for family.
And is that something that we pay? Is
No.
Is that a benefit? That's the employee?
That's employee funded
Okay.
solely, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Bruce?
Thank you. Darcy, what reasoning did they give for that increase?
Basically the economy. I mean, we have a really good claims record and loss ratio with them. And, you know, Wellmark gives our employees flexibility to go, you know, to any provider. So they can go Sanford, they can go Avera. You can even, you know, go to Mayo if you want with Wellmark. So many companies took increases at over 20%, 28%, 30% with Wellmark. So because we have such a good record, we feel very fortunate to be at 11.15.
Just a follow-up, if
Yeah.
I might. Did we look at anyone else? Did we look at any other people?
We did not look at any other companies besides Wellmark this year. We certainly can go out next year, and quote some other companies. If that is the will of the council, we're happy to do that. But we stayed with Wellmark just because of the flexibility it gives our employees.
Okay, I'm sure you know what you're doing. I just,
Yeah.
at some point, I think it makes sense,
Okay,
you know, to keep people honest and look at
absolutely.
other options. You know,
Yep.
I think down the road, that's something we really ought to consider.
Yep.
Perhaps
And-
next year.
We will be happy to do that.
Thanks.
Yep.
Our city manager, Amanda Mack, has something to say, and then our finance officer, Christine.
I'd just like to comment that we certainly can explore other companies. Any significant changes that we make to health insurance, including the carrier, does have to be approved by our unions.
Yeah.
And so it's not just as simple as we're going to move to someone else. And based on contract language, you know, those three unions would have to be involved in those discussions, as they should be, which is fine. So it's a little more nuanced than just researching who else might be available.
Finance officer Bob Zine, did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor. It was, I believe, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we actually did have Marsh go out and look. They looked at doing a Sanford plan and a Vera plan, and then there was, I think it's United Health Partners out of Minnesota, and then Wellmark. And at the time, we thought Wellmark was the best fit because it gives our employees the opportunity to go to wherever they want versus just the Sanford. And then at that time, United Health, I don't know, is that
United Health Partners?
Yes. Just wasn't large enough here in South Dakota, so they weren't able to compete with Wellmark. Now that could change, but it's probably going to take a little bit of time for them to get established in South Dakota. They're pretty big in Minnesota, but they don't have a lot yet in South Dakota. So I think we will always keep looking and then always keep that as an option.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Have we ever looked at the possibility of joining with the municipal utilities?
We did look at that this year a little bit per their request. They have made some changes in their benefit plans, specifically related to their union members. And they opted to not join us, you know, but to go in a different direction on their own. So. Yes, they're a different union.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
That employee union offered something that was quite beneficial for them, and that left their management team. So they approached us about joining, and they decided that wasn't the route they wanted to go. So we would have been looking at
11.7%, I believe.
Right, if we had added them. But a total of how many employees would have come over?
12
employees. So it wouldn't be the large group that if all of their employees were joining us.
Councilman Villauer?
Thank you, Mayor. Question, we did budget, I mean, the budget that we're discussing right now, that 11% increase that we did budget, or that is incorporated into our budget?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
thank
believe
you.
she budgeted 12.
Okay. And then just an observation on the vision care. I noticed we must have agreed to a 2-year contract
we
with
did.
them a year ago already.
Yep.
And also, you may want to point out, they still reference our previous finance officer in their letter, so you may want to bring that to their attention.
We can do that.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreements. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Item I is an approval of a professional services agreement for plans examiner and building code consulting services associated with the city's building permit application processing with Lookout Plan and Code Consulting in the amount of 20% of our building permit fee. We'll go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, to tell us more.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to give some credit to our Community Development Manager here, Brandy Hanton, and she's on standby here this evening for helping with this discussion as needed. We're bringing some information forward to the council in the hopes to help process our building permit plan reviews, not just from a workload standpoint, but from a technical knowledge and aptitude standpoint as well. As you're aware, our building official resigned here a few months back and took another opportunity for a nonprofit organization that was an excellent fit for him and his desires in his career. So we've since moved on and trying to fill his role since Jason left us, and have not had any luck with that to date. As we talked earlier, some of these technical positions are getting more and more difficult to find and to fill with good quality experienced candidates. Building official is no exception to that. So with the recent South Dakota Municipal League Conference, Brandy was able to connect with the Building Officials Association at that conference, and it was a very valuable conversation she had there, and actually that's where this idea came to fruition from. There's a recently retired building official for the city of Spearfish. His name is Tom Paisley. He's buying out a company known as Lookout Plan and Code Consulting. He's a certified plans examiner and a certified building inspector through the ICC, the International Code Council, that we adopt their building codes through. And what this would be is a remote review and approval on a code level of some of our more major building permit reviews that we perform for the city. So a lot of the larger commercial plan reviews and maybe any of the more complex structural reviews that we would need assistance with that depth of code knowledge would be the intent of this contract. As far as the fee is concerned, I'll walk through that here with you if I could. The rate is 20% of the building permit fee. Now what that means is the way our building permit fees are set up is we have a base building permit fee that's based on the valuation of the project. So if somebody's building a $1 million project, we take that valuation into our building permit chart and we come up with a fee out of that table. Now we recently, if you recall, adopted an additional fee on top of that. I'd call it an ancillary fee for administrative review and processing of permits. That was one of our former building official's ideas that he brought with us from his past experience. So what we did is we took that base building permit fee and we're now added on a surcharge of 50% of that fee to cover our administration duties and processing of all the permit reviews. Well, of that 50%, this contract would give this gentleman, this company, 20% of that 50. So he's taking 20% of that 50 that we recently implemented. So if you look at it in that perspective, it's not costing us anything from where we were a few months ago, but it's taking 20% of that new 50% fee that we just implemented. We think that that's a very fair, reasonable price just based on discussions with the Building Officials Association and some of the contacts that Brandy reached through them. And in summary, I think that really covers all the bases. Excellent amount of experience that this particular gentleman has. I think it's roughly 25 years as a building inspector, building official, plans examiner, and comes with some high level of credentials through the ICC. With that, I guess the goal here too would be to use this as a stopgap measure for the meantime and utilize these services for a few months. We would still continue to keep the building official job posted in the hopes to fill that. And there's room for discussion here, whether this continues in a favorable manner. It could even transition into a more permanent type of scenario if through discussions with the city manager she was in agreement with that, and through formal approval with the council as necessary if we were to go that route. But the initial goal right now would be to continue to advertise the building official and try to get that filled.
Thank you. First, we need to take up a motion to approve the agreement.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Now, Councilman Bueller, you had something to say?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions for Heath. Heath, first off, how many other folks in the state are using this organization? Do they work just in South Dakota? Is it a region? And do we know of any close communities that are working with them?
Yeah, the company that this gentleman is just joining or buying out actually has contracts with the city of Harrisburg, Box Elder, Deadwood, Custer, Meade County, Lincoln County, and then they also work with several other architectural firms and companies West River as well.
Have we had discussions with any of those folks just to see how it's working out for them?
I'd have to defer to Brandy on that one and see if she's been able to do that.
Their headquarters are in Spearfish?
I'd defer to Brandy on that one as well.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Heath. So just through discussion with the Building Officials Association at Municipal League, they all recommended Tom Paisley, and that was talking with Sioux Falls and Deadwood. Or no, not Deadwood, because he serves them. And I have not reached out to the specific communities that they currently have contracts with, but altogether, I do think that it'll be a good service. And we've already communicated about how the process would go, and I do think that it would serve us well, especially right now of just not in the interim time of not having a building official, and that code knowledge is something that community development is lacking right now, because that is a matter of me looking up codes and that taking a lot of time and just not having all of that expertise and background. So this will be a great stopgap until we potentially fill that position.
Where are they located?
He will reside in Spearfish. Okay. So he just recently, as of I believe last week, retired with the city of Spearfish, and then we'll take over this business. The previous owner, I know he's been balancing both, because the previous owner was retiring from Lookout Code in October. So he's been transitioning, but now I believe is officially retired with the city of Spearfish.
So he has some sort of staff that works with him, a number of folks, or just him?
Nope.
All by himself?
Yep. Just himself. We send him any plan reviews that we want, and like Heath described, for new commercial projects or additions, anything that has a little more complexity to it for code review, we would send to him and set up a Bluebeam account, and then he would do his plan markups. He would send us a cover sheet of his code review, just explaining everything that that was looked at. And a lot of times commercial projects will have their code review submitted anyway, and then he would mark that up and verify that everything was compliant.
Thanks, Brandy.
Councilman Schutte?
Thank you, Mayor. This may be a difficult one to answer, but I do see it as a value that we need, just based off the turnover we had, and just be a benefit for the city. However, I'm just curious on, has there been anything discussed as far as timelines, or is there anything in the contract, how long it would take to, upon receiving information, responding to us? Just, because that might be difficult to answer on their end even, but is there any standard to kind of go by? So there's no unforeseen delays in projects.
Do you want me to answer that, Heath?
Which one of you would like to answer that?
Yeah, Councilman Shetty, that's a great question. I was just scanning the contract here quickly. I don't recall as though there was a turnaround time stipulated in the contract. We could certainly incorporate something in there. Our current ordinances allow up to, Brandy, putting you on the spot, we have some outlined.
For 60 days.
Yeah, it's pretty extensive. We never take that long, but we could incorporate something reasonable in here. I'm thinking maybe a 30-day max window, if, something along those lines, if Tom were amicable to that. Again, the complexity of the project is really what drives that, and of course, the workload as well. So we would adhere at a bare minimum to our ordinances and our standards that require a 60-day turnaround. Again, we never take that long, but...
And if I could expand on that,
Yeah.
Heath, I did specifically ask Tom that question, and he said, and again, it all depends on just workload that he has from other communities as well, but he doesn't see that taking over 2 weeks of getting that code review back. So, which fits into our turnaround time for large commercial projects. We've stayed pretty, we have pretty good turnaround times currently, and so that would coincide with what we are currently doing.
Thank you. Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Brandy or Heath, so just to make sure this is straight in my head, so he would just do the plan review, and then our current building inspector would do the on-site inspections.
Correct.
Would he have any access to him? I mean, is he gonna be able to call him if he has questions? And
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a ancillary service provided in this contract for additional code consulting or things that aren't specific to a plan review. That would come at the cost of $75 per hour minimum. So we'd, of course, want to be selective on how we utilize that, but definitely there's a resource for us as well. We've also, again, through Brandy's contacts she's recently made, we've also leveraged those resources. Other communities with building officials are glad to help us out in a pinch. Any kind of questions she's had, where to find something in the code books, for example, they've been a great resource. So we're always able to leverage them as well on a continual basis too.
Councilman Danforth?
Normally, if we have an employee that's doing this and they make an error, and it has happened where we've had plan review issues, oftentimes those aren't known till maybe later on, and where, you know, that person, we could fire him or burn him at the stake or do something. What's the liability with an individual like this, a consultant like this, in regards to their plan review, and if there are issues that occur, let's call it after the fact per se, where maybe an error was made in the plan review?
I believe he has a burn at the stake clause in his contract here, Councilman Danforth.
We're good then, Heath, man.
Yeah, we're great. No, he does, Brandy did confirm this today too. He is going to carry, his company carries a liability insurance for the performance of their duties. And so I don't believe we've gotten the details of that, but we can get those details and have our city attorney review those to her level of comfort. But I believe that would cover and address the exact concern that you're expressing there, that their own liability insurance will cover those instances.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Thank you, Mayor. I assume one of the benefits or goals here is to expedite the process for, you know, developers out there, because I think we all hear the comments. We've heard them for years, and we still continue to hear them. I'm not, you know, pointing fingers at anybody, but it's just a reality of the situation that we know that there's still delays in getting things done. I'm assuming this would be, you know, a partial solution or help in that concern.
Yes, absolutely, Councilman Vilhauer. Brandy, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, if I, just in, I guess, a little bit of defense of community development, a lot of the times when we're hearing those things from developers or applicants, we are not receiving complete information and have relayed that information. Now with the OpenGov software has made it much more efficient on our end, so we're able to see where different applications are and that we are giving them prompt reviews and feedback.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I know there's two sides to every story, and unfortunately, we're always hearing the negative side of it, and so I appreciate hearing that. Do we have any kind of ballpark estimate as far, let's say in a typical year, what this 20% would generate for someone?
Yes, so around 30,000.
Okay.
And so, and like Heath described, so this year now with implementing that 50% plan review fee increase, then we obviously were covering it. And then if we were looking at what 2021, what we received in like commercial building permits, that was around 70 in the fees, that was around 78,000. So we are actually still, let me get that number here. So even if in 2022, with the building permit fees, with that 50% increase, and if we were paying, if we had Tom reviewing all of those permits, which was 24, then that would be, we would still be 48,000 and some ahead of last year, what we collected for fees.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. I'm going to use my discretion, and I'm going to flip the last two items Unless there's an objection from the council, I would like to take up item C for the consent agenda right now to get that out of the way. And item C, so there's no objection from the council? Okay, item C is an approval of the purchase agreement with the South Dakota Department of Transportation for approximately 1 acre of land. And I'll actually leave it to our Public Works Director to tell us where it's at and all of that stuff.
Thank you, Mayor. I will. So it's on the northwest end of town. I don't have a really good vicinity map here, so I apologize. But we briefly spoke about this previously in some council update information on the availability of a portion of land that the DOT procured some years back. This section of land was part of what was at the time a northern bypass route for the city that would utilize the existing northern Watertown exit off I-29 and then proceed to the west. I think that's 28th Avenue, if I remember right, 26th Avenue that runs east and west up there. That would become the northern bypass route. At some point, the DOT was working with the city on establishing that north bypass route, and the brakes kind of got pumped on it at some point or another, a decade or so ago. I'm not sure how long ago it's been. But with that, the state had already procured some of the land. They are now kind of cleaning house and getting rid of some of these parcels of land that they don't want or feel that they need. They made this available to us as a first right of refusal, so to speak. Not formally, but that's more or less what it was. And they asked if we had interest in that. They can sell it directly to us because we're another public agency. So we reviewed that information, and we thought, yes, from a staff standpoint, this made sense to procure this land from the state. In my opinion, when you look at our transportation master plan, there will be a point in time when that north bypass route is still critical for this community. And this is a small portion of that land up there, but for just under $11,000, I felt it was worth making a recommendation to the council to go ahead and buy it. It might cost us 3 times that 2 years from now. We don't know. So we think it's a wise choice, and the money for this purchase would come out of the land restricted fund that the finance office holds each year for instances just like this. So it's funded through that account without any issue. Without rambling on about the northern bypass loop any further, I'll just stand by for any questions here.
Thank you very much. Chair will now entertain a motion to approve the agreement and authorize the city manager to execute any and all required documents. Motion made by Councilman Villauer, second by Councilman Tupper. To begin the conversation, I will go to Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out that in the letter that offers it to the city of Sioux Falls, that may want to be corrected at some point, but it is addressed to the city of Watertown.
Councilman Danforth.
Sioux Falls is really reaching out right now, aren't they? Heath, it's not clear to me where this is. I've looked at the document that is attached. I still don't know where it is. One thing that, and I can't tell you if this is true or not, but what we were told is that when it looked like the viability of a north bypass was going to be planned for and the land was acquired, the state shifted to a south bypass as probably the higher probability for another exit into Watertown. Again, I don't know if that's true or not. And probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe more, the state offered us some of the land that had been acquired for that north bypass, and we passed that up. We did not take that and acquire that from the city standpoint. So I really got to question what good 1 little acre does for us when we gave up a whole stretch along whatever road that is, that gravel road up there. I know it's only $10,900, but it's $10,900 when we don't have and gave up, didn't see the value, couldn't justify that whole other stretch of land. So that's kind of where I'm at on this as far as, again, I don't know where it's exactly at. I have an approximation where this piece is at, but I believe it's very similar or adjacent to the land that we gave up and did not take the option to purchase.
Director Von Nye?
Certainly. All good points to consider, Councilman Danforth. The ArcGIS map is always slow to open here because it's running on Wi-Fi, so kind of like using dial-up when I'm trying to open this map. So I will share my screen to display the map that we do have, and I know it doesn't show the full extent of how you get here, but I'll try to talk through it. So on Teams, you'll notice 26th Avenue dead ends up here. This is up on the northwest corner of the River Ridge subdivision. So the Lutheran Church is off here to your southeast where River Ridge subdivision is, and they're building houses up here. This area right here is actually new dedicated parkland for that subdivision that we recently finally got dedicated for the River Ridge subdivision. And 26th Avenue, running east and west here, if you take that all the way east, that's where you'll hit that interchange on I-29, the north interchange on I-29. So this eventually turns to pavement at the stop sign to the east there, where you hit Old Highway 81, and you keep going east and you'll hit I-29. So we're at the far west end of that stretch where it dead ends on the top of the hill there, and if you keep going west, you'd fall down into the river bottom area. But this is the 1 acre parcel. I'm not familiar with the parcels that we've let go in the past, and I wasn't part of those discussions. But just sitting in my capacity now today as the city engineer and the public works director, that's why I brought forward the recommendation I did, just knowing that this northern bypass will at some point be critical for the city. Is this acre going to make or break that bypass route? No, but is it going to cost us more to obtain later on? Yes, that's highly likely if we were to proceed that way. The reason that north bypass in my mind is so critical, because everything's building up to 26 like it is, that development east of here is also going to continue to fill in. And all that traffic from all those residences, the only way for them to get west across the river is to drop down to 14th Avenue and then take the bridge over the river. So you're putting a lot of traffic on 14th, all the more over the next 10, 20 years. I can see this north bypass being triggered at some point in our future for that reason.
Any follow-up, Councilman?
Yeah. If you take that road where the T is there, Heath, you go a mile up, then you go left there, cross the bridge to Sioux Conifer Road. So I just don't think, personally, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen in the manner that it is here. The land's already been given up, majority of the land that was acquired. I just think it's a waste of our dollars, to be honest with you, to acquire that without having really any assurances that that's ever going to happen, or if it does happen, if this is what it's going to be required. Just my 2 cents.
Councilman Villauer?
Thank you, Mayor. I remember, because I was on the council at that time, when we had that conversation and let the land go that Mike's referring to. But my question is, I mean, Heath, you're referencing the north bypass, but isn't this small parcel, albeit small, still critical? Isn't it critical for all the development that's going on up there now that was not going on up there? You know, we had the conversation before. I mean, isn't this critical for other uses aside from potentially a bypass up there? I mean, isn't there other reasons why we'd want to get our hands on this versus just a bypass?
Yeah, Councilman Villauer, because it's immediately adjacent to that newly dedicated parkland, that's one of the points of logic we were applying here. It wouldn't be an island floating out there of city land, but it's going to be immediately adjacent to. So for that reason, yeah, I mean, there's a multitude of things that could come to light here. Is it necessary for that parkland to be successful? Probably not, but it is immediately adjacent to it, so that does help in the discussion.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Bueller.
Question for Heath. Heath, if we don't purchase this, what issues are we going to have moving forward if we do have a bypass? And I know I brought up the history last time. I don't want to beat the dead horse, but you know, the plan, a big reason for that too, another reason for having that bypass back in that, at that time, was to move trucks through what we didn't, so we wouldn't have the congestion on 212, to move trucks down to 20 coming off the interstate. So just, but the question to you, I guess, is if we don't, what's that do to us in the future if we want to develop that bypass?
I think that really just boils down to paying more for it later. I mean, if that bypass or when that bypass comes to fruition as a need for the community, I mean, there's the processes and procedures we go through to procure those rights of way, just like we've done here a decade or so ago. And we would just simply follow that same process. And if this portion of land becomes part of that, it's just we'll just likely pay more for it later. But again, it is only an acre, so if we pay 30 grand for it instead of 10 grand, it's not a huge loss, but something to factor in.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have a hard time envisioning how that road would go there, with that being at that angle, and then to the east being parkland now. If we wanted to use parkland of any sort, it would have to go to a public vote to relinquish that, if I'm correct. I think that's correct. Anyway, so I guess I'm just having a hard time envisioning without a plan in front of me on how that would go through there.
Yeah, Councilman Paulson, I haven't seen the specific layouts of the former route that was being worked on. You know, I believe the intent was that it started a curve to the southwest here and would cut through a portion of that parkland like you've indicated. And yes, I believe you're right. In order to utilize that parkland, that becomes an exercise in itself in order to do that. But so where that final alignment would fall, that's anybody's best guess today. I would just go back and emphasize that 26 is that connector with an existing interchange at I-29, and that's something communities fight for, is getting those interchanges and access to the interstate. We've got one there that's way underutilized, and so this north bypass route, I feel, again, is just going to gravitate to 26 because of that existing interchange, and not having to jog a mile or two north or south from there. It's a straight shot over to that existing interchange. But again, it's only an acre. It's something to consider, and that's why we brought it forward for the council.
Councilman Tupper?
Is that right now, is that a city street, county road, township road? Whose responsibility is, excuse me, is the road?
That is under the township's ownership and maintenance, their jurisdiction. I don't believe any portion of 26 has been annexed yet. I'm looking over to Brandy, our community development manager. On the north side of River Ridge, none of 26 has been annexed yet, so that's all in the township yet at this point.
So would that make us responsible for that road at that time, or that portion?
As far as the north bypass is concerned?
As far as maintenance, as of today, if we were to buy that?
No, this portion would just be adjacent to that road right away, so that wouldn't make us responsible for any portion of it, since we're not procuring any of that right away or the township roadway.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. So if you get your crystal ball out and look this project, well, let's just say 5 year, Councilman Paulson was saying that it may have to go to a public vote or something if there was a parkland right there, correct? So let's just say down the road there is some scenarios where that project starts to be thought about, bypass and north bypass, but then now there's the parkland there. Would the city, having this land already acquired now, help in the discussions to either go forward or not go forward, if that were to happen down the road, or that starts to become reasonable talk again? So I can just having this land, would that just help be like an anchor to help keep the door going, swing in that direction? Would it help in those talks, I guess, is my question for that.
I think that could definitely be a factor in those discussions. I think to Councilman Paulson's point, the process would still be the process for the parkland. You know, but any factors you can add into that discussion like that, existing And that discussion will be a lot bigger than this 1 acre. I mean, we'll have procured land further down to the west, well beyond this piece, that would also tie into that discussion as well.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Heath, another question. This would be a DOT project if we did this, I would assume.
Well, that depends on the funding.
DOT, I know, were the ones that were considering the project to begin with. Said they were going to do it, then they said we're going to wait 2 years, and they decided to wait 4 years, and then it came off the map.
Yeah.
And that being said, one of the questions I'd have is, would it require a public vote by statute if the DOT has that project? And I'm going to tail this up with one other question, and that is the property that we kind of let go last time. Is it possible that we could still retain that property for this bypass?
To your first question, that kind of gets into the legal realm that we'd have to do some research on. I don't know if the DOT has the power to trump our parkland, our dedicated parkland rules and regulations according to state statute. I'm doubtful that they do, but I couldn't answer that with certainty. To your second point, we'd have to research. I'm assuming they proceeded to sell it off to other private parties, and it'd just be going back through that procurement process with those landowners at this time.
Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, Mayor, I got just a couple of them. Didn't the National Guard, some of their land initially was a part of this original bypass project, and that has been withdrawn, correct? It is no longer able to be used for this project. Didn't that happen a couple years ago?
Correct. They have,
So-
yes, that's correct.
Okay, yes. So now we have that piece of this that's gone. When this was going through, and one of the reasons why we did not secure the land when it was offered to us up north, there were two things. It completely went off the radar on the DOT, not on there at all, wasn't out there long range or nothing. The other was the extensive concern with the whole long lowland area along the river down there in the bottom, and the cost of getting that built. So, and then my other question was, whose project is it, a DOT project or ours? And then you answered that. But, you know, the fact that we don't have any other land, it's not on their radar, it may never happen. And it's not a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but it looks like a complete waste of our money at this point with no other indicators that this is going to happen. Or, if it does happen, that this is in fact going to get used. I don't see there's any value of that with the adjacent parkland. I think that's a stretch. I think it is what it is. It's a leftover piece of land that they had that they don't want. If the state thought that they needed that for the project in the future, I would hope they'd keep it. So why would we want it if they don't want it? That's where I'm at on it, I guess. So.
Any further questions or comments, Council?
One more comment.
Councilman Bueller?
I will just say that, you know, originally when this project was looked at, and it was a priority at one point for the state. I mean, they said they were going to do that project. We were having a lot of issues now that we've widened 212, and we've got the southern. I don't like the term bypass, but that road we put in down there, that does take some of the pressure off, I think, in some regard, to part of 212 anyway. So the environment's changed quite a bit from back then when we were looking at that project. That's all. Thanks.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreement. Finance Officer Bob Zine, would you please call the roll?
I can do that. Bueller. No. Danforth.
No.
Helene.
Aye.
Paulson. No. Shetty.
Aye.
Tupper. No. Billhauer.
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
Item J is an approval for the finance officer to issue a special check to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for a flood control feasibility study in the amount of $175,000 for a total financial commitment of $200,000. Chair is going to make something clear at the beginning of this. There was some questions among the council as to how to handle this topic tonight. I have chosen to keep it on a public hearing because of several different reasons. Number one of which is I believe that the public has a right to know, but number two, this is dealing with a very sensitive issue that has been in the community for going on 30 years now, I would say. And it is my desire to handle this in a different way than it has been handled before. And one of those is to be very transparent with what we're talking about and how we're going to handle it. And that means that we are going to have a public hearing, even if it is uncomfortable. With that said, if any council person wants to have more time to consider this and vote on it, I will entertain a motion to postpone indefinitely. That will mean that we will have to take this up as a special council session at a time before the next council session, because there is some concern before tonight's meeting. We were talking it over with our engineering department, particularly city and engineer Justin Peterson, and there was some concern as far as the timing with the Corps of Engineers. As far as we need to get them the money so that they can proceed with what they're doing. So it will require action before the next council session, but I will entertain a motion to postpone indefinitely, and then we will just set up a time for a special council session to take this back up and vote on it. So with that said, I want to have a public hearing on it, but if any council person wants more time, I will postpone indefinitely. I will take that up, and it's still our vote as to whether or not we want to postpone it or vote on it tonight. But as it's been 30 years that this has been debated, I don't think another few days is going to matter. With that said, we will go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, for more information.
Thank you, Mayor. So as we're all aware, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has kicked off a flood control feasibility study. We had a work session with them here a few weeks ago. They were on site in Watertown for a couple of days. The first day was a work group that brainstormed different ideas and possibilities on what some of the flood mitigation measures might be. It was a very productive discussion. There were probably 8 to 10 Corps of Engineers staff there. There were some elected officials present off and on through the meeting. Brandy Hanton, the community development manager, and Justin Peterson, the assistant city engineer, and myself were there for staff. Manager Mack was in attendance for part of the meetings as well. Really what that was a work session to shed light on options for flood mitigation measures that we could be considering now today. We're not completely forgetting about the past studies. They're very important. There's a lot of good technical information in those that the Corps can continue to use and help save us money on the cost for this study. This study was earmarked at $1.8 million. The feds are picking up half of that, $900,000 of their share. The other half of $900,000 comes at a local cost, but the city has applied through the South Dakota Swarms funding, the Surface Water Resource Management Fund, that they help with our $900,000 and pay half of that. Some news we just received this week is that the Board of Water and Natural Resources approved an additional $200,000 that would make up their full contribution of $450,000. So again, the federal share $900, the state is now in for $450, and the city is in for $450. And that's for the all-encompassing feasibility study at the Corps of Engineers' estimated cost of $1.8 million. What this amount of money does that we have before the council tonight, this additional $175,000, that puts the total contribution from the city in at $200,000 to continue their feasibility work. They've got a lot of legwork to do now after those initial kickoff meetings, and they would continue to dig into and assess those alternatives, and also gear up for additional public meetings coming up here in December, January timeframe. We did also find out from the state that the money we're spending to date, the initial $25,000 and then this additional $175,000 if it's approved, is fully reimbursable at a 50% cost share with the state. We have a reimbursable form that we can work with finance office and get that process rolling as well. So what essentially what that means is this 200,000 we as a city would be in for 100,000 of that. The state would be picking up the other 100,000. From a time frame standpoint, the Corps of Engineers thought that this additional 175 would get them through, I'm looking at Justin, March into the early spring time frame before they'd be asking for another contribution from us to continue their work. The other point I wanted to touch on briefly, the second day of the Corps of Engineers visit here, we did hold a landowner meeting. It was explicitly, the invites were limited to the landowners from up north, where a decade ago or more, 2 decades ago, we were looking at the dry dam option. And when we say dry dam, that's what the feasibility study pointed to at that time as the most logical based on all the factors that went into that study. Economical factors, functionality on helping mitigate the flood risks, landowner impacts, all those things were weighed into these feasibility studies in the past. So we had a meeting with those landowners and had a good kind of, I refer to it as an icebreaker session with them, let them know that this study was kicking off again to be renewed, and also let them know and really emphasize that the meeting we had the day before with the Corps explored a whole myriad of options. This is not stepping into a dry dam option and here we go with a dry dam option only. This is a new blank slate with the Corps. They've got a lot of new factors over the last 2 decades that they have to consider now that they didn't and weren't required to consider a couple decades ago. So my point in sharing that is the fruits of this feasibility study could very well produce different options than that dry dam option. It very well likely be a hybrid of a multitude of options. It might be some certified levies through town where we're working with the more directly impacted landowners and not the landowners up north of town. It might be a series of smaller dry dams, detention structures up north of town in combination with a levee system. It could be some channel cleaning and channel widening measures. There were lots of options like that that were thrown out in that work session. So that's kind of a recap, not just this funding, but just wanted to give the council an update on where we're at after those meetings we had with the Corps a few weeks ago and explain a little bit about the cost share and the financing and where we're at today. So with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much. Now, just to explain how we're going to do this, we have to take a motion in order to begin conversation on this. So I will accept a motion to approve the issuance of the check with the understanding to the council that if anyone does want to have an alternative motion later on in the conversation, we will take that up and discuss that. But we do need a motion in order to discuss it. So for discussion purposes, Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Okay. Now, in order to begin, I will defer to also to City Manager Mack. I just want to make it very clear to everyone that this is not just bringing up the past. This is a new study that is not just an attempt to bring up past options and try to ram them through. That is not what this is about. This is about coming up with a flood mitigation proposal for the city of Watertown, which is extremely important so that we do not go through. If we're talking about revisiting the past, let's revisit the floods and the impact that they had on Watertown. And that's all we're trying to do here is just figure out a way to move forward with a way to protect this lovely city. This is not necessarily going down the option that was explored in the past. And I just want to make that very clear. Any conversation, Council? Councilman Danforth.
Oh, I got a lot of questions. First of all, an inquiry on it. The last 2 meetings that you referenced, the one with the Corps and then the one with the landowners, was the full council invited to that?
No, they were not.
Okay. I think they should be in the future. I think we need to be a part of, to hear some of those discussions if possible.
Let's let City Manager Mack address that as long as it's on the
Sure.
top.
In our discussions with the Corps on setting up those meetings, we did suggest that the entire council be invited At this time, they were not ready for any sort of public meeting. So we did invite the mayor and deputy mayor to attend those so that there was council representation. They are largely driving the process at our guidance. We're helping guide that. But they wanted to spend time really vetting out additional options, and there'll be an opportunity for more public meetings going forward. This was the initial kickoff, and they did not want to have, a public meeting with the landowners until it was time to actually share information. This was just an introduction to the process.
Well, first of all of us want some type of a solution for the river because it affects not only the community in regards to our residents and homes, but it affects our lake and our two lakes here, and it affects everybody downstream. So some type of solution is, I know it's desired by everybody, it's just a matter of how do we get to something that's acceptable. But the question I have is a couple questions. One is, let's say we did the study and we don't know what the outcome is going to be, but let's just say whatever that outcome is adamantly opposed by the landowners. So my question at that point is, how long is that study, how long is it pertinent? Is it still that information good for 5 years? Is it good for 10 years? Is it ever good if once it gets, if we don't follow through? So how long is that study good for? And then the question I have is it, again, get back to it, if for some reason whatever is proposed is not acceptable to the landowners, so we got two options. One is we just don't do anything like we haven't done, or we have to commit to forcing the issue. And I'm not sure that there's the appetite to do that. So what's the value of this? And I think Heath, in your description of it, it probably makes some sense in there, and that is we don't know what the proposal is going to be, right? So unless we spend the money, we're not going to know. But, what if we get to that point when if it's just not an acceptable and there's no way around that stance? What do? We've spent another $1 or $2 million, I think, on the whole thing between everybody's money. What do? And that's my concern. Is it's very easily locked up, understandably, by really a small number of people, the landowners, which is very important, and I understand that. So that's just the thoughts that I have on it. Is how long is the study good for, and what if we end up in the same scenario?
Would you like to address that?
I don't have the answer of how long it's good for. I do know that it'll take roughly 3 years to complete the study, so we're a ways out from accomplishing having a final study in hand. It is a long process that the Corps of Engineers has to go through. The other point I was going to make to that, in our kickoff meetings with the Corps, mind you, this is a full new staff. There are a couple of individuals that kind of knew about the Watertown study from the past because they were on board with the Corps, but in different positions. Greg, for example, is one of the higher-ups that we're dealing with. And some of the new criteria he emphasized in our meetings really hit on the fact I hit on a minute ago, that if this doesn't work as a community, and that includes the people up north being part of that community, they're not going to recommend something that doesn't work for the community. And that was pretty telling to me that this is a whole new blank slate. We are walking into this eyes wide open. There are no blinders on with the past perceived outcomes from past studies. They're really looking at it from scratch here with a whole new set of regulations and requirements that they have to look at it with. So I don't know if that helps with the risk that's there. There's always a risk. You're not going to make everybody happy with whatever solution comes to be, but I do know that the approach today sounds a lot different than what it was a couple decades ago.
We're going to go in order of me recognizing the council people. It's going to be Vilhauer, Schutte, then Paulson. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, question for Finance Officer Bob Zine. We have budgeted for this study, correct? Or are in the process of?
Yes, it is in the 2023 budget, all in. So this initial that's before you is not in the budget, but it's in for the 2023.
Okay.
So it's accounted for.
Okay. Just a comment, I was not able to, I was in and out of the two-day charrette, as it was called, here a couple, 3 weeks ago. But what I was able to pick up on that Public Works Director Von I alluded to is I was excited to hear that there were a number of different options being considered rather than just one slam dunk option that was proposed way back when. And that's still what the Corps is sticking to as far as the recommendation that there was a lot of different options being kicked around. And again, very preliminary at this point, but I was excited to hear that they are taking a whole new look at this, and so as to what's going to come out of that, I don't know. I'm not an engineer. A lot of what I heard was over my head, but just the fact there are a lot of things being considered, I was pleased with that. Another comment that I'd like to make is I understand that we're an awful long ways from coming forward with a recommendation as far as where we go with this, but we've got any number of delegations that are going to bat for us on this. We've got the Lake and Pasco Water Project District people are looking at committing dollars. We've got state dollars looking at coming to help us out with this, as well as our federal delegation has gone to bat with us to bring this study back to life. So I would hate to pull the plug on this before we even get a chance to go anywheres with the study in and of itself. So for that reason, $175,000, I don't argue that's big dollars, but we'd be foolish, in my opinion, to not take the next step on this and keep this project or process moving forward.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. Director Von I guess your explanation did help. I had some concerns coming into this meeting, just not the price tag of the next step, $175,000, but also the communication with all parties involved. And I guess I hadn't heard anything yet as far as how those conversations went. And maybe it's too premature. Maybe it does take this next phase to get the proper communication so we can really get a pulse of where this goes. I am encouraged by the perspective that the Corps of Engineer you're saying is taking on this. They are going to, it sounds like they're going to evaluate anything and everything that's possible in this process instead of just kind of having tunnel vision, if you will. So I mean, I guess that's my concern, I guess. But I'm encouraged by just some of the conversation tonight because I want to make sure we keep all parties involved and communicate as much as we can. And I just don't want to spend money foolishly if it looks like it's not going to go anywhere. But based off the direction that they're really trying to widen their scope, I guess it's got potential. So that's just my comment on this.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. This is definitely a tough discussion. Obviously, I do view us, we are the council for Watertown, but obviously we have to take an effect that there's other people and communities that are affected by this. I've gotten to know, or I've gotten close with a family that I didn't realize was affected, but they're directly affected by this. They did talk to me about it. I understand their concerns, and it makes sense, but at the same time, this has the potential to affect thousands of people, especially within Watertown city limits. So I do think it's appropriate to move forward with it, at least the feasibility study, because one thing the public has to realize is we're not forcing this right now. This is, it's a look. We're going to make sure all the possibilities are exhausted, so the most people get the most benefit from it. And then at that point, that's when all the decisions are going to be made. And we just have to get those options out there because there may be different options other than just a dry dam and taking people's land, because obviously no one wants to do that. But I think this is huge for this community. And we seem to flood every few years right now. And it costs this community a lot, and it costs the communities downstream a lot to fight these floods constantly. And so I think it is appropriate to move forward.
Councilman Tupper?
The importance of this whole thing is that I think the mayor touched on this. For one thing, is we have to be very, very public, because you guys have all heard me voice my opinion in the past. The people north of here are our neighbors. They're just as much our neighbors as the guy that lives across the street from me. Before in the past, they weren't really treated right in the whole situation. So I don't oppose this. I just want to be very careful moving forward, make sure that it is made very public and everybody is involved in it. Question for you, Mr. Von Eye. When the public or our neighbors to the north were invited, what was the turnout to that? Was it?
There were probably 40-ish people in the room. I don't have an exact count, I apologize, but somewhere around there. And of course, a mix of reactions. The point was to emphasize to them this was an icebreaker meeting. We just wanted them to know that we're getting this process rolling. And there were a couple comments, that maybe echoed some of the past distaste to a dry dam option. But there were also some constructive comments about being appreciative of being brought into the loop and wanting to know more as we progress, which we assured them we would definitely keep them in tune with. So I think overall it was a good, productive discussion.
Thank you.
And I would just like to answer that. I was at that meeting as well. And I would say the conversation started with let's say a rehashing of the past. And it took a while to get past that point to where discussion about the future would lead us. And I think at that point, while still definitely not an attitude of universal agreement in that room, there was at least some appreciation that we were not just going down the same road that we have in the past, and also that, most importantly, that we're not just going to run this through irregardless of public sentiment to our neighbors of the north. We are just trying to come up with a solution. I think that everyone understands. We also got them to understand the importance to the community, so that they don't think it's just benefiting a few that only live at Lake Compesca, that it is for the entire community. So I'd say it didn't start great, but it ended better than what I think we have been in the last 30 years. So I'll just leave it at that. Councilman Bueller?
Thank you.
Or Councilman Tupper, did you have anything?
Just when you say the community of Watertown, it's not only the community of Watertown, but it's the whole Big Sioux watershed below us also that would be complimented by that.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think we have much of a choice. I think their requirements for the Corps now are that they investigate other opportunities, other options, or combinations of options to do this. I think it's very important that we're respectful of the landowners, but I think at some point, as we move through this process, we look at options. As these options come up, I think it's going to be key to keep those landowners involved, and get a pulse, kind of get some ideas to how they feel about if we did A and if we did B. As those A, B, C's come available, I think it's important for us to kind of get a feel for where they're at on that. But we got roughly 80% of the population of this county is in Watertown. And so, it's something that's going to have to serve everybody. And this has been the 5,000-pound elephant in the room for some years. And we've waited. We've waited a long time for the Corps to move on this thing. And I fear that if we do anything to delay this, we could end up moving to the bottom of the list, and could be another long period of time before it gets revisited. So those are just a few of my comments. Thank you.
Councilman Danforth, if you're okay with this, I don't want to wait for my comments until after everyone and make it sound like I want to engage in the conversation and not just say like I have the final word. Well, I do, but but with that said, I didn't want to spring my comments at the end and then not have anyone have a chance to reply to them as well. Councilman Bueller mentioned a good thing about the timing. If you go back to when this was being thought about, even if we come up with a solution, we're looking at years down the road, kind of an uncomfortable number of years, truthfully. But if we postpone this and we say no to this study at this time, I can only imagine how many more years we're going to be pushed down the road. I would say easily, and I'm not kidding, past my lifetime. I really do think so, with the way that government moves. And I know one thing is I got involved with government. I know that this is an oxymoron, but I got involved with government to get things done, especially for my hometown. And this has been one of, if not the largest issue facing this community for decades. And if there is a chance of coming up with a solution that would benefit the community and protect us from another devastating flood, I've got to take that chance. It is uncomfortable to me to basically write a check knowing that we might be having this conversation again next year about writing another check. But I do know when you're talking about $175,000, when you figure out the property value that is affected in this town and the tax revenue that would face this city with another flood that would shut us down for a couple months, I just know what the cost is, and in a cost-benefit analysis, I'll take that chance. So it does make me uncomfortable. I don't like not knowing what the cost is going to be, what the timing is going to be, or what the actual idea is going to be proposed. But I do know what my motivation is, and that's to just try to get things done for this community that I love. So anyway, now go ahead, poke fun with me. Councilman Danforth?
Heath, just a quick question, and then I got just a couple little comments here, but how many landowners, what's the number, not people, but specifically landowners do we have? And then the question is, how many of them were represented at that meeting, just out of curiosity? Roughly?
If I could refer to Justin Peterson, Assistant City Engineer, my recollection, Justin, was in the 40s.
No, well, whatever the...
Yeah, I don't know the exact number either. I think it's in the 40s or 50s. And
as far as total number of landowners?
Property owners.
Yeah.
Property owners. Could be 10 on a property, but that's one, right?
Yeah, and some of the landowners have multiple properties.
Right.
But, and then maybe half were represented there.
Okay.
Maybe.
Do we keep track of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The number of landowners impacted too, there's two tiers of them essentially. The one is where the physical construction of the dam would be, where you're building an earthen berm, essentially a pretty large earthen berm that is going to be useless to whoever's land that is. So that'd be a complete buyout scenario for something like that. Again, this is all speculatory in that scenario. But the second tier of impacted landowners, again, under the dry dam option, is what they call the pooling area. You know, any certain flood event is going to pool and back up water to a different level depending on the degree of the rain event or the spring snow melt. But the overall pooling area, that would be the all-encompassing 40-some landowners. Now, I point that out because 90% of the time, 30-some of those 40-some landowners aren't going to be impacted at all. They're going to be using their land, farming it, ranching it, whatever it is they're doing on it now. And a lot smaller percentage will be a permanent impact or a buyout of sorts.
Okay. All right. So, and then, Amanda, I would just like to say, you know, the logic for the Corps and for such to have that as a non-public meeting, I think there's good logic there because it's an easier environment at that point to have discussion without being under the microscope. So I don't think we have a choice in doing this. I really don't. There's all kinds of concerns, unknowns. We don't have a choice. I think this is something we have to do. We have to find out where the study takes us, and then we can deal with the issues at that point.
Director Von Eye?
To Councilman Danforth's point, and actually to the mayor's point a little bit ago, I just wanted to express as a staff member, I'm looking at a slide here from the public information we shared with the landowners. It was 1972 when the Corps first started looking at flood control studies and performed the first flood control study for Watertown. So you're looking at 5 decades worth of work that's gone into this. And the reason I'm pointing that out is I, for one, want to be results-oriented for the community. And again, in my mind, that community extends well beyond the city limits as far as flood control measures are concerned. So we, Justin and I as staff, and I'm sure the city manager agrees with this, we will be striving when working with the Corps and impressing upon them those different options, those hybrid options, the shifting of gears to get to a results-oriented solution through this study. And that's our goal as staff, and we're hopeful in accomplishing that. And again, I was very pleasantly informed by them about their methods today are different than they were a couple decades ago. And I think we've got a lot of room to grow here in a positive direction with this study.
Any further questions or comments? I am going to take my mayoral privilege and have the last word before we vote. I just want to share, this isn't for the council necessarily, except to say thank you. This is for the community, and to just point out a couple things that I hope that they are appreciative of, and that is, number one, the openness of this discussion. This is not being handled in secret. This is the government of Watertown representing the people, sharing all the information we have, so that if you disagree with us, you can come forward and tell us why. But also, most importantly, so that nobody can come to us later and say that we are hiding any information, that we are trying to do something without input from the public. And that is the public that lives in Watertown and around this community. We are sharing all the information we have. And the most important thing that I'd like to share, and this is the thanks that I have to the council and to the city staff, is again, this attitude of getting things done and not kicking anything down the road that is important to this community, addressing it, finding solutions. There's no promise that we will find a solution. We all know that. But the attitude on this council I appreciate very much, and that is the desire to find one. And I want to thank you for that. With that said, unless there's an objection, I will go to vote. All those in favor of approving this check, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We are on to old business. Any old business? Any new business? Any liaison member reports? Councilman Schutte?
I guess I wasn't planning on it. I almost forgot, but I'm on the library board, and we have a new director for the Watertown Regional Library, Maria how do you pronounce your last name? Gruner? Gruner. Maria Gruner. Just my opinion and my thought is she's due. She's ready, and so I look forward to moving forward in the library, and just wanted to just acknowledge her tonight for her promotion.
Maria? Maria, I would like if you would take a moment to come to the microphone and just say, because you have been working at our library here for quite some time, and just say how long you've been working and your background and why you wanted the position. I also wanted to take this opportunity simply because a lot of people don't understand, a lot of people might not understand that we as a city council, or not even city manager Mack, made this decision to hire you. This was the library board, and that is because I would have made the decision. If I had. Yeah. So you know. Yeah, we were pressuring the library board to come up with such an obvious choice. But no, by state law, this is governed by the library board, and they made that decision. I think they made the right decision. But Maria, please tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I've been employed here at Watertown Regional Library and with the City of Watertown for approximately the last 14 years as the assistant director. I've done a wide range of things. I've worked with the library board previously. I mostly deal with adult services, so anything having to do with adults, that's me. Before that, I've worked in a number of different libraries. I've actually been working in libraries since I was about 14, so about 25 years now. And I've been in management for about 22 years. And I do have my master's in library and information sciences. And I got that back in about 2007. And so I'm just very excited about the opportunity. I'm originally from the Dual County area, so I kind of came back home and have been coming to Watertown my entire life. And I guess I decided to apply for the job, mostly because I enjoy being part of the bigger picture and helping to make the decisions that affect the community and the people that I serve.
Thank you very much. I know that we applauded you before, but let's please do so again. Thank you very much. Any other liaison member reports? Announcements, City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Shetty stole my first announcement, so congratulations again, Maria. I'd also like to welcome Larry Mogg to our team. He's our new forestry superintendent. He's also coming to us from the city of Brookings, so pretty excited about that. If you have not seen November 10th and possibly November 11th, the showers, steam room, sauna, and bathrooms will be blocked off in the women's locker room to work on the steam room. There's some mold remediation that is happening. The private locker rooms will be available in the family locker rooms. And then lastly, please put 4:30 p.m. on December 5th. Location to be determined for the reveal of the city logo and the State of the City address by Mayor Holeen.
It'll be an event you will not want to miss, unless you have something better to do. Any other announcements? Councilman Villauer.
I'd like to ask our city manager, what is the status of the 3rd Avenue construction project? Can you give us an update on that? I've had people asking me.
It's coming along and it'll be done very soon. For a more technical answer, I'll go to our Public Works Director, Heath Bonai.
Thank you, Manager Mack. I just talked with Justin about this earlier today. They're having a little bit of difficulty getting the last bit of asphalt to pave the rest of 3rd. Pending that, they're probably a couple weeks out yet, hopefully if they can get that asphalt in. But all intentions are it's open yet here this fall, and hopefully sooner than later.
Just making a point, fall isn't lasting much longer.
The calendar.
We don't need that negativity.
No, I'm just saying it's like it'll be good that it is finished before winter. So, City Manager
Just
Mack?
another project, the Foundation Plaza is also coming along and looking at completion date sometime in December. Correct? Y'all are not helping at all. But if you drive by there, it is coming along nicely. The equipment's going up. The stage is there. So such a great project.
Yeah, the foundation, Councilman Paulson?
Just on that note, I see a lot of negative comments out there about, not only Highway 212, but 3rd Avenue. And there are a lot of complications right now still with supply chain issues and stuff that you wouldn't even think about. So just give them credit if you can, because it's a hard world right now to be in. And right now it's cold and people are miserable. So
I know I get teased a lot from my friends who say that you can't get from one side of Watertown to the other because of all the construction going on. I would just ask for a little bit of grace considering the limitations on the personnel and the supplies, and just say, in the past, we would be teased about not wanting to go from one side of Watertown to the other because you didn't want to drive on the roads, and now it's the opposite. There's so much construction going on and so much repair. So just a little more patience, please, I guess. But thank you. Any further announcements? Yeah, please exercise your right to vote tomorrow. Protect our constitutional republic. And please get out and vote. There is no reason to go into executive session. Chair will therefore entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Good night and God bless you, Watertown.